Wait, you're putting that inside me? The trembling woman gasps, staring at the massive legal document spread across the kitchen table, papers that would make her owner of everything stretching to the horizon. The townspeople had sneered when the black mail-order bride stepped off that dusty stagecoach, placing bets on how quickly the uppity woman would flee back east once frontier reality crushed her spirit. They expected her to wither into nothing, forgotten like tumbleweeds in the desert wind. But the giant cowboy who greeted her saw something different. Not a bride, but salvation itself. His ranch teeters on collapse, threatened by the territory's most ruthless land baron. Yet beneath his failing cattle operation lies a secret worth millions that only she can legally claim. The transfer papers tremble in her hands. Accept and face the wrath of powerful enemies who've destroyed lives for far less. Refuse and watch everything crumble. Will she find the courage to seize unprecedented power, or will terror destroy them both before she can sign her name? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The stagecoach wheels ground to a halt in Copper Ridge, Arizona territory. Dust clouds swirled around the wooden platform as Eliza Thornton stepped down onto the sun-baked earth. Her worn leather boots touched frontier soil for the first time. Whispers started immediately. The saloon doors creaked open as men peered out at the tall African-American woman adjusting her simple blue dress. Their stares burned like desert sun. A group of townswomen clustered near the general store. Their hushed voices carried cruel predictions about how quickly this mail-order bride would realize her mistake. Money changed hands as bets were placed on her survival. Eliza kept her chin high despite the trembling in her hands. She had taught herself to read using discarded law books in the orphanage. Those same books had filled her mind with knowledge of territorial statutes and property rights, knowledge that felt useless now under these hostile glares. A shadow fell across her path. She looked up to see a mountain of a man approaching. Thomas McAllister stood nearly 7 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block the afternoon sun. His weathered face showed none of the scorn she had grown accustomed to. "Miss Thornton, I'm Bear McAllister." His voice rumbled low and respectful. He tipped his hat and offered his massive hand to help her into his wagon. The gesture surprised her more than his size. "Thank you, Mr. McAllister." She climbed up beside him, noting how his hands shook slightly as he gripped the reins. His nervousness had nothing to do with her presence. Something else weighed on his mind. The wagon rolled through town past more staring faces. Children pointed from doorways while their mothers pulled them back inside. The message was clear. She was not welcome here. Miles of open range stretched before them as they left Copper Ridge behind. Bear's ranch spread across the valley like a small kingdom. Cattle dotted the grasslands while mountains rose in the distance. The beauty of it took her breath away. "It's called Thunderheart Ranch," Bear said quietly. Eliza studied his profile as he spoke. Lines of worry creased his features. His jaw clenched whenever he looked toward a particular cluster of buildings near the main house. They approached the ranch headquarters where several cowboys gathered around the corral. These men greeted Eliza with genuine warmth. Their easy acceptance felt like cool water after the desert of town hostility. "Welcome to Thunderheart, Miss Eliza," called out an older cowhand named Pete. "Been looking forward to having a lady around here again." The other workers nodded agreement. Their smiles reached their eyes, unlike the forced politeness she had expected. For the first time since arriving, Eliza felt a flutter of hope. Bear showed her to the main house. The structure was well built, but showed signs of neglect. Paint peeled from the shutters, while several roof shingles lay scattered in the yard. Financial strain showed in every delayed repair. Inside, the furniture spoke of better times. A grandfather clock stood silent in the corner. Fine china gathered dust behind glass cabinet doors. Whatever prosperity this place once knew was fading fast. That evening, Eliza helped prepare dinner while Bear tended to ranch business. She overheard fragments of worried conversations through the open windows. Words like overdue payments and bank notices drifted in with the desert breeze. A locked wooden chest in the corner of the main room caught her attention. Bear's eyes always shifted nervously toward it during conversation. Whatever was inside clearly troubled him deeply. 3 days into her stay, a black carriage rolled up the main drive. Eliza watched from the kitchen window as a well-dressed man stepped out. His expensive suit and polished boots marked him as someone with serious money. Cornelius Drake commanded attention the moment he entered the house. His silver hair was perfectly groomed and his cold eyes missed nothing. He spoke with the authority of a man accustomed to getting his way. "McAllister, we need to discuss your situation." Bear's entire body tensed. His hands balled into fists at his sides. "There's nothing to discuss, Drake. I'll have your money soon enough." Drake's smile held no warmth. He glanced around the room with calculating eyes, taking inventory like a man appraising merchandise. "Time is running short, my friend. Very short indeed." The threat hung in the air long after Drake's carriage disappeared down the drive. Bear stood at the window watching until the dust settled. His shoulders sagged under an invisible weight. That night, Eliza found Bear sitting alone at the kitchen table. The locked chest sat open before him. Official documents spilled across the wooden surface. His face showed the strain of a man carrying secrets too heavy to bear alone. He looked up as she approached. Something in his expression had changed. Desperation mixed with determination in his weathered features. "Miss Thornton, I need to tell you something. About why I really brought you here." Eliza's heart began to race. She sat down across from him, noting how his massive hands trembled as he spread out a legal document. The paper was thick and official with territorial seals along the margins. "This ranch sits on top of something Drake wants. Something worth more than all the cattle in Arizona." Bear's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He turned the document toward her so she could read the faded text. Her eyes widened as she recognized the legal terminology from her father's old law books. "Wait," she breathed, staring at the massive property deed. "You're putting that inside me? You want me to own everything?" Bear nodded slowly. The weight of his request settled between them like a thunderclap. Outside, coyotes howled in the distance as if sensing the moment that would change everything. Bear's hands shook as he explained the impossible truth. His father had discovered copper deposits beneath Thunderheart Ranch worth millions, but territorial mining laws from the Mexican-American War created a legal maze. Only a married woman could hold clear title to both surface land and mineral rights. Eliza stared at the property deed spread before her. The document would transfer everything to her name. Every acre, every building, every ounce of copper hidden beneath the desert floor. "You need me to become the legal owner," she whispered. Bear nodded. His desperation was complete now. Without this arrangement, Drake would seize everything through forged documents and corrupt officials. With it, Eliza would become the wealthiest landowner in Arizona territory. The magnitude terrified her. She had arrived as a mail-order bride with nothing. Now she faced ownership of a mining fortune that could change her life forever. "I'll do it." Her voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Bear's relief was immediate and overwhelming. He pulled out an inkwell and quill with trembling fingers. Eliza signed her name with careful strokes. Each letter transferred massive wealth and equally massive danger into her hands. When she finished, the ranch belonged entirely to her. Bear was now technically her employee. The power shift felt surreal. She owned the house they sat in, the land stretching to the mountains, and riches beyond imagination buried in the earth below. The responsibility crushed down on her shoulders like a physical weight. 3 days later, Drake returned with reinforcements. Sheriff Hayes rode alongside him with 2 deputies in tow. Their horses kicked up dust clouds as they approached the main house with official authority backing their presence. Eliza watched from the front porch as the group dismounted. Drake's confidence radiated from every step. He carried a leather satchel filled with what appeared to be legal documents. "Mornin', McAllister," Drake called out. His voice carried the satisfaction of a man about to claim victory. "I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news about your property ownership." Bear stepped forward, but Eliza moved past him. This was her fight now. She was the legal owner and would face Drake herself. "Mr. Drake, What brings you to my ranch?" The emphasis on ownership made Drake's eyes narrow. He had not expected this development. His prepared speech faltered for a moment before he regained composure. "Your ranch?" "Miss, I'm afraid there's been a serious misunderstanding." Drake opened his satchel and withdrew a stack of official-looking papers. The documents bore territorial seals and impressive signatures. To most observers, they would appear completely legitimate. These papers prove that Thunderheart Ranch was never legally owned by the McAllister family. The original land grant was fraudulent. Sheriff Hayes stepped forward with practiced authority. His hand rested on his gun belt as he addressed Eliza directly. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to vacate these premises immediately. Mr. Drake has legal claim to this property." Eliza felt the moment that would define her entire future arriving like an oncoming storm. The townspeople who had gathered to watch expected her complete capitulation. They waited for the uppity woman to crumble under official pressure. Instead, she stepped closer to examine Drake's documents. Her father's legal training stirred in her memory like awakening thunder. Benjamin Calhoun had been one of the territory's most skilled mining attorneys before his interracial marriage destroyed his career. His knowledge lived on in the law books he had left behind. Eliza had memorized every page during long nights at the orphanage. Those hours of study suddenly became her greatest weapon. She studied Drake's papers with growing confidence. The territorial seal caught her attention first. The date was wrong by 3 years. The signature belonged to an official who had died before the supposed document was created. "Sheriff Hayes," she said calmly, "I need you to look at something." Her voice carried authority that surprised everyone present. She pointed to specific flaws in Drake's forgeries with the precision of an experienced attorney. "This seal is dated 1875, but the territorial office didn't use this design until 1878, and this signature belongs to Judge Morrison, who died in 1874. The crowd murmured as Eliza's expertise became undeniable. She had spent years studying territorial law through her father's abandoned books. Every statute, every precedent, every legal requirement was burned into her memory. Drake's face darkened as his carefully planned deception unraveled. He had not expected to face someone with genuine legal knowledge. His forged documents were sophisticated enough to fool most people, but not someone trained in territorial mining law. "Furthermore," Eliza continued, "the land grant number sequence is completely wrong for this region. These documents are fraudulent." Sheriff Hayes examined the papers more closely. His expression shifted from confidence to doubt as Eliza's observations proved accurate. The woman he had dismissed as powerless was systematically destroying Drake's entire legal claim. The townspeople watched in stunned silence. Their expectations crumbled as the mail-order bride they had scorned demonstrated expertise that surpassed anyone in the territory. This was not the outcome they had anticipated. Drake's fury was barely contained. His plan had seemed foolproof until this moment. He gathered his worthless documents with shaking hands while his authority evaporated in the desert sun. "This isn't over," he said through clenched teeth. But everyone present knew the balance of power had shifted permanently. Eliza had not only defended her property but exposed Drake's criminal methods. The woman who had arrived as an outsider now commanded respect through pure intellectual superiority. As Drake's group rode away in defeat, the crowd began to disperse. Their whispered conversations carried new tones of grudging admiration. The uppity woman had proven herself in ways none of them had imagined possible. Bear looked at Eliza with something approaching awe. She had transformed from vulnerable bride to legal champion in a matter of minutes. The partnership he had hoped for was becoming something far more powerful. Drake's humiliation spread through Copper Ridge like wildfire. Word traveled fast that the territory's most feared land baron had been outmaneuvered by a woman he had dismissed as powerless. His reputation took a devastating blow that demanded immediate retaliation. The attacks began 3 nights later. Cattle were found scattered across neighboring ranches with cut fences and broken water troughs. Feed supplies disappeared overnight while equipment mysteriously broke down. Drake's message was clear without being provable. Bear increased security around the ranch house, but the harassment escalated. Workers reported being followed in town and threatened with job loss if they continued supporting Eliza. The pressure was designed to isolate Thunderheart Ranch from all community support. Eliza refused to be intimidated. She began studying the locked chest contents more thoroughly, discovering her father's extensive legal files hidden beneath ranch documents. Benjamin Calhoun had been more than just a mining attorney. He had been a meticulous record keeper. His papers revealed a disturbing pattern. Drake had been systematically acquiring properties throughout Arizona Territory for over 20 years. The methods were always the same: forged documents, corrupted officials, and intimidation of legitimate owners. More shocking was the personal connection. Benjamin Calhoun had been Drake's original legal partner in the 1850s. They had worked together identifying valuable mining claims before Drake betrayed him and stole several profitable operations. The betrayal had destroyed her father's career and driven her family into poverty. Eliza realized she was not a random target. Drake had been hunting down every property her father had ever worked on, systematically erasing Benjamin Calhoun's legacy from territorial records. Thunderheart Ranch was simply the latest prize in a decades-long campaign of revenge. This knowledge transformed her fear into cold determination. The fight was no longer just about land or money. It was about justice for her father and dozens of other victims Drake had destroyed over the years. Bear found her in the study surrounded by legal documents late one evening. Her eyes blazed with newfound purpose as she organized evidence of Drake's criminal enterprise. The scared mail-order bride had evolved into something far more dangerous. "We're not just defending ourselves anymore," she told him. "We're going on the offensive." Sheriff Hayes arrived the next morning with unexpected news. His investigation into Drake's documents had revealed additional forgeries dating back years. Other property owners were coming forward with similar stories of fraudulent claims and stolen land. "Miss Eliza, I owe you an apology," Hayes admitted. "Drake's been playing me for a fool. These documents you exposed were just the tip of something much bigger." The sheriff's conversion to their cause marked a crucial turning point. With law enforcement finally investigating Drake's activities, Eliza gained the official support needed to build a comprehensive case against him. Drake responded with his most sophisticated attack yet. He arrived with a new set of documents that appeared flawless to casual inspection. The forgeries were expertly crafted with correct dates, proper seals, and believable signatures. But Eliza's expertise had grown sharper through intensive study of her father's files. She spotted subtle flaws that would have escaped most attorneys. The paper stock was wrong for the alleged date. The ink composition didn't match territorial office standards from that period. "These documents claim jurisdiction under the 1848 Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo," she announced to the gathered crowd. "But the specific statute cited here wasn't ratified until 1851, 3 years after this supposed claim was filed." Drake's face reddened as his second attempt at fraud collapsed under scrutiny. The woman he had underestimated was proving to be more legally sophisticated than most territorial judges. Eliza pressed her advantage. She had discovered that Drake's current claim conflicted with mining rights he had already sold to investors in Denver. He was essentially trying to sell the same property twice through fraudulent documentation. "Mr. Drake, according to territorial records, you sold mineral rights to this exact property to the Colorado Mining Consortium in 1876. You can't claim ownership of something you already sold." The contradiction was devastating. Drake had been caught in a web of his own deceptions. His sophisticated forgery operation was beginning to unravel as Eliza exposed each new fraud with surgical precision. Meanwhile, the secret copper mining operation beneath Thunderheart Ranch was producing significant wealth. Eliza used the profits to hire additional legal help and fund a comprehensive investigation into Drake's criminal activities throughout the territory. She discovered that Drake's victims included Mexican families, small ranchers, and other minority landowners who lacked resources to fight back. Her father's files contained evidence of dozens of fraudulent land seizures spanning 2 decades. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Drake had corrupted officials, bribed judges, and destroyed lives across multiple territories. His criminal empire was built on stolen land and forged documents that Eliza could now systematically dismantle. Sheriff Hayes provided crucial support by formally reopening cases that Drake had considered permanently closed. Property owners who had lost everything years earlier began to see hope for the first time since their lands were stolen. Eliza's reputation spread throughout the territory as word of her legal expertise traveled. She had transformed from a scorned outsider to a beacon of hope for victims of land fraud. People began traveling to Thunderheart Ranch, seeking her help with their own cases. Drake's desperation grew as his empire faced its first serious threat. He had spent decades building an untouchable criminal operation, but Eliza's knowledge and determination were systematically destroying everything he had worked to achieve. The stage was set for a final confrontation. Eliza had gathered enough evidence to expose Drake's entire network of fraud and corruption, but she knew he would not surrender without one last desperate attempt to destroy her and everything she represented. The battle for justice was approaching its climax, and Eliza was ready. Eliza discovered the shocking truth while organizing her father's legal files late into the night. Hidden beneath routine property documents was a detailed map of Arizona territory marked with red ink. Every mark indicated a property Drake had targeted or acquired through fraud over 20 years. Thunderheart Ranch was circled in darker ink with notes written in her father's careful handwriting. The annotations revealed that Benjamin Calhoun had discovered the copper deposits in 1856 while working as Drake's legal partner. He had filed the original mineral claims before their partnership dissolved in betrayal and accusations of theft. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Drake had not stumbled upon their ranch by accident. He had known about the copper mine all along because he had helped discover it. This was personal revenge disguised as business acquisition. Her father's files contained even more devastating information. Drake had spent 2 decades systematically hunting down every property Benjamin Calhoun had ever surveyed or claimed. The goal was not just wealth, but complete erasure of her father's legal legacy from territorial records. Page after page revealed the scope of Drake's vendetta. Mexican land grants her father had defended were now in Drake's possession. Mining claims Benjamin had filed for small prospectors had been transferred to Drake's companies through forged documents and corrupted courts. Eliza realized she was living on land that rightfully belonged to her family. Her father had co-discovered the copper deposits and filed legitimate claims before Drake destroyed his career through false accusations and racial prejudice. The irony was staggering. She had been unknowingly fighting for her own inheritance. The personal stakes transformed her entire approach to the conflict. This was no longer about defending Bear's property or even seeking justice for fraud victims. This was about reclaiming her father's stolen legacy and exposing the man who had destroyed her family. Bear found her in the study as dawn broke over the mountains. Legal documents covered every surface while she worked with fevered intensity to document Drake's criminal pattern. Her transformation from scared bride to determined advocate was now complete. "He killed my father," she said without looking up from the papers. "Not with a gun, but with lies and corruption. Papa died broken and poor because Drake stole everything he worked for." The weight of generational injustice settled between them. Eliza was not just fighting for her present, but avenging her past. The battle had become deeply personal in ways that made surrender impossible. Her father's files revealed Drake's methods in precise detail. He would identify valuable properties through legitimate surveying partnerships, then systematically destroy his partners through accusations of fraud or incompetence. Once the original claimants were discredited, Drake would acquire their properties through forged transfers and corrupted legal proceedings. Benjamin Calhoun had been one of Drake's earliest victims. His interracial marriage provided the perfect excuse for destroying his reputation among territorial officials. Once he was discredited as a person, his legal work became easy to challenge and steal. Eliza discovered that her father had suspected Drake's criminal activities and begun documenting evidence before his death. The files contained detailed records of forged signatures, backdated documents, and bribed officials that could destroy Drake's entire operation. But Benjamin had died before he could expose the conspiracy. His evidence had remained hidden until now. Sheriff Hayes arrived with urgent news that confirmed Eliza's worst fears. Drake was preparing a final assault on her ownership, using territorial judges he had corrupted years earlier. The attack would be legal, sophisticated, and potentially unstoppable through normal channels. "He's calling for a formal hearing with Judge Patterson and the Territorial Land Commission," Hayes explained. "Once they rule in his favor, there's no appeal. You'll lose everything." The trap was closing with bureaucratic precision. Drake had learned from his previous failures and was now using his most powerful weapons. Corrupted officials would simply declare his claims legitimate and Eliza's ownership invalid. Traditional legal defense would be useless against rigged proceedings, but Eliza had advantages Drake did not expect. Her father's files contained evidence of the judge's corruption dating back years. She could expose the entire system if she played her cards correctly. More importantly, she understood Drake's psychology now. His obsession with destroying Benjamin Calhoun's legacy had made him careless. He had left trails of evidence that a more cautious criminal would have destroyed long ago. Eliza began planning an entirely different strategy. Instead of defending herself at the rigged hearing, she would use the public forum to expose Drake's decades of fraud. The Territorial Land Commission would become the stage for revealing his entire criminal enterprise. She contacted every property owner who had been victimized by Drake over the years. Mexican families, small ranchers, miners, and settlers who had lost everything to his forged documents and corrupted courts. Many were afraid to speak, but others were eager for justice after years of suffering and silence. Bear watched her transformation with growing admiration. The woman who had stepped off the stagecoach as a frightened mail-order bride was now orchestrating the most comprehensive legal counterattack in territorial history. She had become the champion her father never lived to be. The copper mining operation provided resources for her growing investigation. Eliza hired private investigators to trace Drake's financial networks and document his connections to corrupted officials. Every dollar of mining profit was invested in building an unshakable case for justice. Drake's confidence grew as the hearing date approached. He believed his corrupted judges and sophisticated legal maneuvering would finally eliminate the troublesome woman who had disrupted his plans. He had no idea that Eliza was preparing to destroy his entire criminal empire in full public view. The stage was set for the most important legal confrontation in Arizona Territory history. The territorial courthouse filled beyond capacity on the morning of the hearing. Word had spread throughout Arizona Territory that the most important land dispute in decades would be decided today. Families who had lost properties to Drake's schemes traveled for days to witness the proceedings. Judge Patterson took his seat with the confidence of a man whose verdict was already purchased. Two territorial commissioners flanked him, both known to be in Drake's pocket through years of careful corruption. The fix was complete from their perspective. Drake entered wearing his finest suit with a team of expensive attorneys trailing behind. His leather cases bulged with sophisticated forged documents designed to overwhelm any opposition through sheer volume. He nodded respectfully to the judges who had served his interests so faithfully. Eliza walked in alone, carrying only a single wooden box. Her simple dress contrasted sharply with Drake's expensive legal team, reinforcing the image of David facing Goliath. The crowd murmured as she took her place at the defendant's table without any apparent legal representation. Judge Patterson opened proceedings with barely concealed bias. His tone suggested that this hearing was merely a formality before ruling in Drake's favor. The Territorial Land Commission would simply rubber stamp whatever decision served Drake's interests. "Mr. Drake, please present your claim to the Thunderheart Ranch property." Drake's lead attorney stood with theatrical flourish. He presented document after document claiming to prove that the McAllister family had never legally owned the disputed land. The paperwork appeared flawless to casual observation. "These territorial land grants clearly establish Mr. Drake's legitimate ownership dating back to 1852, the attorney declared. "Miss Thornton's current possession is based on fraudulent transfers and invalid claims." The judges nodded approvingly as Drake's case unfolded. Their predetermined verdict was becoming obvious to everyone present. This was not a fair hearing, but a legal charade designed to legitimize theft. Eliza waited patiently as Drake's team consumed over an hour presenting their elaborate deception. She studied each document carefully, noting flaws that she would soon expose in devastating detail. Her father's training had prepared her for exactly this moment. Judge Patterson finally addressed her with condescending courtesy. His tone suggested that her defense would be a brief interruption before the inevitable ruling in Drake's favor. "Miss Thornton, you may present your response." Eliza stood and opened her wooden box with deliberate calm. Instead of documents, she withdrew a detailed map of Arizona territory marked with red ink. The crowd leaned forward as she spread it across the table. "Your Honor, I am not here to defend my ownership of Thunderheart Ranch. I am here to expose 20 years of systematic fraud that has stolen millions of dollars in property from legitimate owners throughout this territory." Her opening statement sent shockwaves through the courtroom. This was not the defensive response anyone had expected. Judge Patterson's confidence wavered as he realized the hearing was not proceeding according to plan. Eliza pointed to the first red mark on her father's map. She identified a Mexican land grant that Drake had acquired through forged documents in 1858. Then she presented the original papers proving the family's legitimate ownership and Drake's fraudulent claim. The Morales family lost 10,000 acres to Mr. Drake using documents signed by an official who had been dead for 3 years. Here is the death certificate, and here are the impossible signatures. She moved methodically through each marked property on the map. Case after case of fraud spanning 2 decades, forged signatures, backdated documents, impossible legal chronologies, and corrupted officials. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The courtroom erupted as families recognized their stolen properties being discussed. People who had suffered in silence for years suddenly saw their losses validated by expert legal analysis. Their pain transformed into righteous anger. Judge Patterson attempted to regain control, but Eliza's presentation had already exposed his own corruption. She produced records of bribes he had received and fraudulent rulings he had issued in Drake's favor. His authority crumbled under the weight of documented evidence. Drake's face reddened as his carefully constructed empire collapsed in public view. 20 years of criminal activity was being systematically exposed by the woman he had dismissed as powerless. His expensive attorneys sat in stunned silence as their case disintegrated. Eliza saved the most devastating revelation for last. She presented her father's original partnership agreement with Drake from 1855. The document proved that Benjamin Calhoun had co-discovered the copper deposits and filed legitimate claims before Drake destroyed him through false accusations. "Mr. A. Drake has spent 20 years stealing my father's legacy and destroying the families he tried to help. Today, that ends." The crowd rose to its feet as victim after victim stepped forward to confirm Eliza's evidence. Mexican families, small ranchers, miners, and settlers who had lost everything to Drake's schemes. Their united testimony created an unstoppable wave of justice. Sheriff Hayes moved toward Drake's table as the evidence of criminal conspiracy became overwhelming. The territorial commissioners distanced themselves from Judge Patterson as their own corruption faced exposure. Drake's protective network was collapsing in real time. Drake made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. He stood and pointed accusingly at Eliza, while his voice shook with rage and fear. "This woman is lying. She has no legal standing to make these accusations." Eliza smiled with cold satisfaction as she delivered the final blow. She pulled out the property deed that made her legal owner of Thunderheart Ranch and its mineral rights. Her signature on the document gave her every right to challenge fraudulent claims. "I have complete legal standing, Mr. Drake, and I have just proven that you are a criminal who has stolen millions in property through systematic fraud." The gavel fell, but not in Drake's favor. Sheriff Hayes placed Drake under arrest as the courtroom erupted in cheers. 20 years of corruption crumbled in a single afternoon as territorial officials scrambled to distance themselves from the exposed criminal enterprise. Judge Patterson was led away in shackles alongside the man he had served so faithfully. The territorial commissioners, desperate to salvage their own careers, immediately began investigating every property case Drake had touched. Eliza's evidence provided a roadmap for unwinding decades of fraudulent land transfers and returning stolen properties to their rightful owners. Drake's sentencing 3 weeks later drew crowds from across the territory. The judge assigned to replace Patterson handed down 15 years in territorial prison plus restitution to all identified victims. Drake's vast empire of stolen properties would be redistributed according to legitimate ownership claims. Eliza found herself at the center of the most significant legal reformation in Arizona territory history. Her expertise in territorial mining law made her indispensable to officials trying to sort through the complex web of fraudulent documents and corrupted records. The transformation in how people treated her was immediate and complete. The same townspeople who had sneered at her arrival now sought her legal advice for their own property disputes. Children who had once hidden behind their mothers now waved respectfully as she passed through Copper Ridge. Thunderheart Ranch flourished under her ownership. The copper mining operation generated enough wealth to modernize the entire property while employing dozens of workers from surrounding communities. Bear managed daily operations while Eliza handled legal matters and long-term planning. Their partnership had evolved into something neither had expected. What began as a desperate arrangement between strangers had grown into genuine mutual respect and shared purpose. They worked as equals toward common goals without the traditional power imbalances of frontier marriages. 3 months after Drake's conviction, territorial officials from New Mexico and Colorado arrived at Thunderheart Ranch. They had discovered similar patterns of land fraud in their regions and needed Eliza's expertise to identify and prosecute the criminals involved. "Miss Thornton, we believe Drake's operation extended far beyond Arizona territory," the New Mexico territorial attorney explained. "Your methods for exposing document fraud could help us recover millions in stolen properties across the Southwest." Eliza accepted their request without hesitation. Her father's knowledge and her own hard-won expertise could serve justice throughout the region. The scared mail-order bride who had stepped off the stagecoach was now the Southwest's most formidable advocate for property rights. She established a legal practice in the renovated ranch house focusing exclusively on land fraud cases. Families traveled hundreds of miles seeking her help with suspicious property seizures and questionable legal documents. Her reputation for exposing corruption spread faster than wildfire. The work was deeply satisfying in ways she had never imagined. Each fraudulent document she exposed and each stolen property she helped recover felt like victory for her father's memory. Benjamin Calhoun's legal legacy was finally being honored through his daughter's achievements. Bear watched her transformation with quiet pride. The woman he had brought to the ranch as a legal necessity had become a force for justice that extended far beyond their original arrangement. Her success reflected well on his judgment and their partnership. The copper mine continued producing substantial wealth that Eliza invested in expanding her legal practice and supporting other victims of land fraud. She hired investigators, clerks, and junior attorneys to handle the growing caseload of families seeking justice. Sheriff Hayes became her closest ally in law enforcement. His conversion from Drake's unwitting accomplice to Eliza's dedicated supporter demonstrated how corruption could be overcome through exposure to truth and justice. He coordinated with territorial officials across multiple regions to track down Drake's remaining associates. 1 year after her arrival, Eliza stood on the front porch of Thunderheart Ranch, watching the sun set over mountains that now belonged to her. The copper mine shaft gleamed in the distance while cattle grazed peacefully across rolling grasslands. Everything she could see was hers by legal right and hard-fought victory. Bear joined her on the porch carrying 2 cups of coffee. Their evening routine had become as comfortable as an old friendship. The desperate arrangement that brought them together had evolved into something much more meaningful than either had dared hope. 3 more territories want your help with land fraud investigations, he told her. Seems like your reputation is spreading faster than we can keep up with. Eliza smiled with quiet satisfaction. The work was expanding beyond anything she had imagined, but the mission remained the same. Every corrupt official exposed and every stolen property recovered honored her father's memory while building a more just future. The mail-order bride who had arrived with nothing now owned one of the territory's most profitable mining operations. More importantly, she had become the Southwest's leading advocate for property rights and legal justice. Her expertise was reshaping how territorial courts handled land disputes across multiple states. Bear raised his coffee cup in a mock toast to their unlikely partnership. The giant cowboy who had desperately needed a legal solution had found something far more valuable. He had discovered a partner whose intelligence and determination matched his own strength and dedication. To Benjamin Calhoun, Bear said quietly, his daughter turned out to be everything he would have wanted. Eliza touched her cup to his as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Her father's legal knowledge lived on through her work, helping families across the Southwest recover what corruption had stolen from them. The legacy he had been unable to complete in life was being fulfilled through his daughter's courage and expertise. The scared woman who had gasped at signing ownership papers now wielded that power with wisdom and justice. Her transformation was complete, and her impact would be felt for generations.